Chapter 3. It was about 2 o'clock in the morning now, of June 14th. Everyone had just gotten back from the grocery store with a big bag full of DVDs, Superman-flavored ice cream. "What's that supposed to mean?" Lucifer asked. "What are you talking about?" Nicole asked as she looked towards her son. "This." As Lucifer justified his question, he pointed at the 3-gallon bucket. "How does anyone know how Superman tastes?" "You silly clown," Nicole said as she immediately rubbed the top of his head with her knuckles. As she continued to hold him tightly, as she rubbed harder, Angel walked up to the inside. "We can all find out how you taste." Angel had carefully put his mouth to the teenager's neck. "Then, after we taste you, we can make ice cream Lucifer flavored." Just as he had finished his sentence, he had felt a sudden sting to the side of his own neck. Looking off to the side, as far as he could move his eyeballs, he could just barely see Tommy's face as he held onto him with his mortal teeth. "I think," Tom managed as he held onto Angel's flesh, "that Angel flavored would be more interesting." As Tommy held onto his grip, Nicole had stopped rubbing on Lucifer's head as she carefully placed her hand on Tommy's shoulder. "Be careful with those regular teeth, Tom. You're not gonna have those much longer," Nicole said as she then turned to receive a stack of bowls from Belinda as she pulled them out of the cupboard. Ronnie had just pulled out Tommy's birthday cake that Malachi and Eddie had baked the previous day. Right after returning from the store, Malachi had disappeared into his and Nicole's bedroom to retrieve Tom's birthday presents. Though everyone was only showing the normal love and attention to the situation as they normally would, in the back of everyone's minds was an extremely high level of concern, for the fact that there were now 2 teens taking on new abilities that could potentially cause problems if misused. Along with these concerns, however, there was a lot of personal discipline put into use as they fought to not worry about these very normal, for their family, changes. It was about 2:30 in the morning as they all sat down at the kitchen table. Malachi had reached over Tom's shoulder as he held a pre-lit candle towards those that were not lit yet. Then, just as Malachi was lighting the last candle, Eddie turned off the kitchen light and watched as the yellow reflection, from the candles, danced across Tommy's face. Standing beside Tommy, as Tom just stared into the 13 individual sources of light, Lucifer knelt down beside his friend and stared into the side of Tom's face. "Make a wish, Tommy," Lucifer whispered loudly. As Lucifer continued to stare at his friend, he watched Tom's lips seem to curl inwards as he seemed to process his wish within his mind. With this, Tom's eyes had almost closed as he had then turned to face Lucifer. "I wish to be with you for the rest of my life, Lucifer," Tom whispered quietly enough that Lucifer was the only one to hear the wish. Then, as he then faced the candles again, he puckered his lips and blew at the individual dancing lights as they had simultaneously, one by one, went out. Then, just as the last flickering light was extinguished, within the same single breath that he had began with, the kitchen lights had also flickered back on. As Malachi still stood behind Tommy, he put one hand on Lucifer's right shoulder and then his right hand on Tom's right shoulder, as he leaned forward kissing Tom on the top of his head. Eating cake and ice cream took about a half hour as the birthday had permanently embedded itself into the minds of everyone within the home. Along with these images, of which had also helped levitate the worries surrounding their new abilities, Malachi, Nicole, Ronnie, Belinda, Eddie, Angel, Macaulay, Don D, and Lucifer were all within the same thought process as they realized just how happy that they were that Tommy was a member of their family. His presence seemed to be the perfect icing to the family. As everyone finished eating, and then Nicole and Belinda began to wash dishes as Ronnie and Eddie then began to prepare for lunch, Macaulay and Don D went out to the living room to watch movies, as Angel, Lucifer, and Tommy headed out the back door. "You guys stay out of trouble," Malachi said, "and be careful." "We will, Dad," Lucifer said and then quickly closed the sliding glass door. Immediately, as they all stepped off of the porch, Angel floated up to about 10 feet off of the ground, just over Tom's and Lucifer's heads, and then looked down to them. "So, what do you guys want to do?" Angel asked. With his question he then also looked upward, towards the dark sky, over the roof of the house, then moments later faced Tommy and Lucifer again. "I think that we should wait around close to the house." Lucifer spoke up as he looked up towards his cousin, "at least until he's able to fly. Then, After that, I say that all three of us go out and fly around town for a while." "That sounds like fun to me," Tom said, "maybe chase a few cars down Interstate 40. "Only the moving ones," Angel joked as he looked back into the darkness again. "No shit," Lucifer responded with a smile on his face. "I don't think that we would get very far chasing parked cars." "Lord," Tommy thought to himself, "keep your arm around my shoulder and your hand over my mouth." Then as a smile stretched across his face from what was said between Angel and Lucifer, Tommy looked up towards Angel. "What do you keep looking at, Angel?" In response to Tom's question, Angel lowered himself down to Tom's side, put one arm around the back of his waist, and then the other just inside the edge of his jeans, holding onto the denim material within his hand. He re-elevated himself and Tommy to where Angel had been when Tom asked the question. Then, as he pointed in a northeastern direction, towards the sand rocks, Tommy's eyes opened wide as he saw what Angel had seen. The silhouette of the sandhills was the front of them were highlighted by nearby homes, and the light, from the moon, putting a slight outline to the upper edge. "See," Angel said as he pointed, "there is lot that you're missing when you're not flying." A sea-spoke Tom continued to stare in awe. Seconds later, Lucifer had rose to where they were, about even with the top of the roof, and then turned his head to where they were looking also. Though Lucifer did like the view of the sand rocks, he preferred the view of just the moon itself. As he faced the moon, with both Angel and Tommy standing back over his shoulder, towards the sand rocks, Lucifer then looked down towards the roof of the house. "I think that I'll work with Tommy on the flying off of our roof," Lucifer said. "Are you sure?" Angel asked. "That could be too high for him just learning." "Well," Lucifer bogged on to explain, "I'm not gonna have him jump off of it. I'm gonna have him levitate off of it towards me. That way he'll only be moving by his power rather than by accident." "That sounds like a good idea," Angel said as he moved himself real close to Lucifer's side. "Here, Tommy, get onto Lucifer's back." "This should only be in about 10 minutes or so," Angel said as he turned, the other direction, to look over the city of Craig, Colorado. The hot summer air seemed to increase in waves as light gusts of wind blew warm air into Angel's face. "I'll be back in about a half hour or so. By then you guys should be ready to go." "How do you know when it'll start working?" Lucifer asked. "If I had known the other night, maybe I wouldn't have been stuck to the ceiling of my bedroom." "Well, it's different between you and him, Lucifer. When you're born a vampire, it's exactly to the second that you were born. When you're infected, to become a vampire, it's exactly to the second of that infection. You infected Tommy at exactly 3:16 and 15 seconds the other night." "Wow." Lucifer thought out loud, "Why is it that I'm always the last one to find out?" Without waiting for an answer, Lucifer slowly lowered himself and Tommy to the porch. "I'll see you guys later," Angel said, and then instantly shot out into the darkness before Tom or Lucifer could respond. Then, just as Tommy stepped onto the boards of the porch, he watched Lucifer levitate himself back up to the roof and then landed on its shingles as he looked back down towards Tom. "This will work perfectly," Lucifer said as he then disappeared from Tom's view. "We'll just start from way up here," he continued without showing his face. Looking down, to the hand railing in front of him, Tom decided that he would just climb up onto the roof on his own. Setting the sole of his shoe onto the center rail, Tommy then grasped onto the handrail and stood up. Using his hands, he then pulled himself onto his knees on the handrail and then paused as he heard Lucifer still walking around on the roof. Moments later, Tommy continued his climb up to where he was then standing on the handrail and reaching, with his hands, up to the rough edge of the shingles. "Hey Lucifer. Here's my hand." Lifting himself up to his tiptoes, he continued. "Help me up." Immediately responding to Tommy's voice, Lucifer quickly walked to the lower edge of the roof. Lucifer saw Tom's hand and then laid down on his chest to assist. "There," he said quietly, "pull yourself up onto my arm now." As Lucifer braced himself for Tommy's weight, his shirt began to fall towards his face, exposing his belly to the sharp grit of the lower row of shingles. "Okay Lucifer, show me how to do this," Tom said as he then stood up on his own. As he watched Lucifer get up to his feet, he noticed tiny rocks stuck to his bare belly, and then wiped them off of him before Lucifer had even realized that the gravel had stuck to him. "You know, Lucifer, your strength, when you're attempting to use force, should have allowed you to pull me up here by one hand. As Tom spoke, he followed close behind Lucifer as they soon reached the highest peak of the roof. "Yeah. You're right. I forgot about it," Lucifer responded as he suddenly turned to face Tom. "Remember that this is only the second day for me." Then, as he stood at the peak overlooking 9th Street, he continued. "Hey Tommy, listen," Lucifer said as he simultaneously looked at his watch. From Tom's point of view, he could see the bright glow of Lucifer's indiglow light lighting up his face as he continued, "You'll be ready to fly in about 75 seconds. I'm gonna step off of the edge. I want your intentions, however, to be to reach out to hold my hand. If this works, as it should, you'll depart from the roof of the house and then catch my hand. And if it don't?" Tommy responded as he looked down to the ground. "I'll catch you, Tommy. I promise that I won't allow anything to happen to you," Lucifer said as he quickly caught Tom's visual attention. "I love you, I won't let anything happen to you." Instantly, as Lucifer finished his sentence, he looked at his watch again. "Now we have 40 seconds left." As Lucifer paused, he then stepped off of the roof and just floated, midair, about arm's reach from Tom. Staring directly at Tom's face, Lucifer then stretched out his arms. "Now, when I say so, step towards me." "Okay Lucifer," Tom said as he stared Lucifer directly eye to eye, "I trust you." Then, just as he stepped onto the ledge, Tommy reached out towards him, and then, seconds later, began to levitate towards Lucifer. "See? I told you that it would work, Tommy," Lucifer said as a surge of joy went through his body. "Now, come on. Let's go over the downtown area." "All right," Tom said as he held firmly onto Lucifer's hand, "then maybe some other time we can go out to the sand rocks. Or, I don't know, just anywhere," Lucifer continued as he had also remembered that Angel had planned to spend time with them. "My dad said that him, my Uncle Ronnie, my Uncle Eddie, and my mom went to Texas one time. I think that it would be cool to go on a trip like that sometime." Not but only about a second after Lucifer had finished his sentence, he suddenly pointed towards the roof of a semi that was heading east on Interstate 40. "Why are you pointing at that truck, Lucifer?" Tom asked just as he had seen the reason standing on the semi's roof. "What is that?" With his question, Tom too began to point at the moving vehicle. Then, as they got close to the trailer, they saw the silhouette of a person on its roof. "Angel," Lucifer yelled as he simultaneously pointed. Instantly the person turned to face both Tom and Lucifer. "Where did you guys come from?" Angel asked as the two boys landed beside him. "We just left the house," Lucifer said. "Congratulations on your flying," Angel interrupted. "You've got a good family for teachers." "We have a good family for teachers," Lucifer interrupted. "Angel, you're part of the family too." As Lucifer finished speaking, before Angel could respond, he wrapped both arms around his cousin. Then, just seconds later, Lucifer released himself from the hug and then turned to face the direction that the semi was moving. "Why are we on this thing?" Then, before Angel could answer, he quickly shot out another question. And why are you wearing that heavy leather coat in this hot weather?" "Well," Angel began to explain as he simultaneously reached out towards Tommy and turned the teen to face in the same direction. "Pretend that this semi is a large hoverboard. 21st century version of a 20th century skateboard." As Angel began to explain this sort of play, he put both arms out to the sides, for balance, and then waited on the next curve. "Now guys," Angel spoke up again as he noticed that Tommy nor Lucifer were getting into position. "If you don't do this right, we'll lose you at the next corner." Instantly, in response, Tommy stood just the same as Angel as he had also prepared for gravity to attempt to rip him up off of the semi's roof. Not more than 10 seconds after those words had left Angel's mouth, they were quickly headed around a right-handed curve that had Lucifer scraping, with fingernails and all, for some grip on the tin roof before he was airborne. "Lucifer!" Tommy yelled loudly. Instantly, Angel turned and grabbed a hold of Tommy just before he too lost balance. "Tom! He's gonna be alright," Angel yelled and then pointed off to the left side of the road. "See?" Keeping his finger pointed directly at his cousin, Angel could feel the muscles within Tommy's entire body relax. "Hess right there." "Holy shit," Lucifer shouted as he quickly found his footing near Tom and Angel. "That curve back there." As Lucifer spoke, he pointed towards the direction that they were coming from. Just about took my ass out. Let's do it again. Now you're talking. You guys are gonna love this game. Just wait till we get a chance to do this around the curves by Aspen. This game is far out. As Angel continued to speak, Lucifer had already prepared himself for the next curve. Now, however, it was Tommy with his arms crossed with an odd look on his face as he stared at Lucifer. "A little change in heart, Lucifer?" Tommy asked. Then, just as they passed a street sign indicating another right-hand curve with a 35-mile-per-hour curve warning, Tommy quickly crept down, just as both Lucifer and Angel were, and prepared for the next battle with gravity. After about an hour of playing this game from the same roof, all three of the boys had realized that they were suddenly, once again, under a lot of street lights. Then, just as Angel looked off, to the north side of the road, he noticed a parking lot to a shopping center in Steamboat Springs. "Hey guys." Angel spoke up. "We're like 50 miles from home. Maybe we should head back." "It's about 4:30 right now, guys." Lucifer spoke up. "We've only got another 2 hours till sunrise." "What's it matter?" Tommy asked. "Tom," Angel said as he put his hand on Tommy's shoulder, "we can't be out in the sun after our 13th birthdays. The direct sunlight, of which we have too much of during the summer, can kill us." Tom had heard of this before but had, over time, forgotten about it because of the fact that it didn't apply to him. Now, however, it did. "Well, let's fly home then," Tom suggested. "We don't have to go home, Lucifer said, "we just need to get either closer to home, or keep a good eye on the time so that we have enough time to get home." "So, how fast can we fly?" Tom asked just as all three of them lifted up off of the trailer. "Honestly," Angel said as they just floated in one place, "I don't think that there is a limit to our speed. I remember that your dad and Lucifer had described a situation to where him, Ronnie, and Eddie had killed someone in Arizona." "That was Eric Myers," Lucifer suddenly interrupted. "You're right, that was the situation. Anyway, they had traveled from the western border of Colorado to the Pacific Ocean, and back several times in their search for this Eric Myers," Angel continued. "On each one-way swipe it was only taking between 4 and 7 minutes. 4 to 7 minutes. Tom shrieked. That would be like thousands of miles per hour. Actually that would be like over or closer to 10,000 miles per hour. Tom was stunned by Angel's words as his jaw had nearly hit the ground. "So, how do we go that fast?" "Just by doing it," Angel answered. "Let's go. You guys follow me." No sooner than the words had left his mouth, all three of them were gliding into the western direction of Moffat County. As they followed close behind as Angel kept going faster and faster, lights down below soon became a blur until they went higher into the clear sky. Soon, areas that were towns. Craig, Maybell, Vernal, Salt Lake. All of these areas had soon become just faint lights far down below. Then, just as Lucifer had thought about looking at his watch, he had simultaneously noticed that they were over water. "Guys, we're over the ocean," Lucifer said loudly. Then, just as he looked towards Tommy, an airplane suddenly showed up out of the middle of nowhere, almost clipping all three of the boys. "Oh shit," Lucifer yelled and then looked back towards the aircraft. "All right guys," Angel announced. "We better head back, otherwise we'll wind up in Hawaii or some foreign country for that matter." "How are we gonna find our way home, Angel?" Tommy asked as they had all come to a stop while still over the Pacific. As they looked back, into the direction that they had just come from, they could just barely make out the lights from Seattle, Washington. "We'll just follow the same way that we had gone to come this far," Angel responded. "But I was watching you, not the ground," Tom said, and then Lucifer nodded his head as he acknowledged doing the same thing. "I know the way home guys, but listen. Anytime that you're out at night, always know where you are and keep track of the landmarks, different clusters of lights, and the time." As Angel finished speaking he then had the guys follow close behind, again, as he led the way back home. Just minutes later, as they sat down on the back porch of their house, they decided that they would stay in for the rest of the night. Inside the kitchen, Just as Ronnie had walked out of the living room with both Macaulay and Dundee, he looked up just in time to see Angel, Lucifer, and Tommy about to open the sliding glass door. Pausing as he watched them come in, he waited until Tommy came in. "So, how do you like flying, Tom?" "It's cool. And we can go real fast too," Tom said as excitement was stamped all over his face. "We've just got to watch out for airplanes." "Yeah. You better be careful with those airplanes." Ronnie responded, "You might not die, however, you can destroy that aircraft and kill everyone in it. So be very careful." "Where's my mom and dad?" Lucifer asked Ronnie. "They've gone to bed already. Most likely they're already asleep also," Ron said, and then continued on his way out of the kitchen with his kids. As the rest of the house had calmed down, both Tommy and Lucifer went into their room for the night. "Hi guys," Macaulay said as they walked into the room, "did you guys have fun?" "Yeah, we did." "Did you and Dundee watch all of the DVDs?" Tom asked as he pulled off his t-shirt and tossed it into the corner of the room. "No. We just watched 2 of them. Also, I think that we finished off the Superman ice cream." As Macaulay continued to talk, he was also trying to quickly remove his shoes as he sat at the top of the ladder to his bunk. "You guys want to play for a while before bed?" "Ah." Lucifer began to answer, "Maybe stay up and talk quietly. My mom and dad are already asleep." "Yeah right," Macaulay said. "The way that they were acting. I wouldn't be surprised if you were to become a big brother soon." Then, just as Macaulay stopped talking, both his shirt and jeans suddenly flew through the air and landed on Tommy's t-shirt in the corner of the room. "What are you doing?" Lucifer asked. It had been routine for all 3 of the boys to sleep without a t-shirt, socks, or shoes, yet it was also routine, since they had individually graduated themselves out of their pajamas, to sleep in their underwear and jeans. "It's too hot in here," Macaulay whispered as he simultaneously saw the hallway light flicker on. "Besides that, it's much more comfortable without them on." Looking at one another, as Macaulay had pulled his legs up onto his bunk, both Lucifer and Tommy instantly removed their jeans as well. Then, right after Tommy handed his jeans to Lucifer, Lucifer threw them onto the quickly growing pile. Before the clothes had even hit the floor, Tommy had leaned forward and grabbed a hold of the sheet that was folded up at the foot of the bed. "You're right," Lucifer said as he turned over, onto his side, and rested his head on Tom's chest. "This is much more comfortable without them on." "Boys and girls, would you please sit down as I take attendance?" the teacher bellowed out just as he walked into the room. Then, before the students had much of a chance to even respond to the male teacher's request, he walked right up to Macaulay's side and looked down to him. "Your last name must be Declue, right?" "Yes sir," Macaulay responded. This teacher must have been a regular that had been around a while, as he had immediately put Big Teeth as being a Declue. This sort of stereotyping, however, left the teacher clueless to the fact that Dundee was his sister. "Oh. Wait a minute here," the older man said. "There's another Declue in here somewhere." As the words came out of his mouth, Dundee, who had been standing right in front of him, looking the other way, immediately turned to face him. "I'm Dundee Declue, sir," the shy little girl said as she instantly realized that the room's attention was now on her. Regardless, Dundee had known most of the other students from elementary school. The only real difference here was the teacher and also the new school, as both her and her brother both attended their first day of middle school. As they had walked into the school, just moments before, it was obvious, all the way from the front door of the school, down the hall, and to their classroom, that the middle school proudly claimed its part as being the Craig Bulldogs. Compared to the Sunset Elementary School, the middle school might as well have been the biggest building in the world, as each and every student had taken a large amount of time finding their individual rooms. "Well, you must be related to Macaulay by marriage then, right?" the teacher pressed. "Actually, no sir, I'm Macaulay's sister. We're twins," Dundee replied as she had almost hid her entire body behind her backpack that she held tightly within her arms. "Well, that's good then. My name is Mr. Bai and I'll be your guys' homeroom teacher for 5th grade. Okay. You Declue kids come from a smart family. I look forward to being your teacher," the man said, and then reached out as he pat Dondi on the shoulder. "And I look forward to being your student, sir," she replied as a smile grew across her face. Then, just seconds afterwards, Dondi saw a male student that she had known since kindergarten, walking up to her side. "Hello Dondi," the handsome young man said, "how do you like the new school?" "Well, you too," the teacher interrupted. "How about you guys have a seat?" "Okay everybody," Mr. Bai said loudly. "Please find a seat." "I like it," Dondi answered. Then, just as her and the boy had found seats beside each other, and then Macaulay on the other side of him. "It's kinda big, but so far it looks good. So how are you doing, Bobby John?" "I'm doing good." Then, as he paused to look at Macaulay, he then looked back to her. Is he still into sucking blood out of people? Bobby John had, still to that day, remembered their first day of kindergarten as they played out in the hallway. Bobby John had cut himself, and then Macaulay instantly took to nursing on him up until their father caught them. "Only you, Bobby John. So far anyway," Dondi said as she began to catch herself staring at her male friend. Over the years she had felt a sort of attraction towards Bobby John that she wasn't able to quite put into words. As she thought back to the past, she realized that her attraction towards him had started long before this. As she continued to think to the past, she could remember that previous year. Exactly a year for that matter, September 15th of 2032, just 3 months after she had gotten herself so deep into staring at him that the teacher, Mrs. Garrett, had called her name at least a dozen times before she was snapped out of the spell that Bobby John had over her. Dondi Declue. Instantly, Dondi nearly jumped out of her seat as her new teacher screamed her name. "Honey. We do attendance every morning. You might as well get used to it. Now, when I call your name, you say here. Okay?" "Yes sir. I'm here." With a quick smile, and about a dozen shades of red that flashed through her cheeks, she fought to catch her poseur as quick as possible. "Macaulay Declue," Mr. Bai called out. "Here," Macaulay said as he raised his hand and then looked at his sister. His sister was obviously embarrassed by the instant attention put onto her. Then, as the teacher had called his name, Dondi peered at him as an attempt to show that she wasn't embarrassed. Instantly Macaulay stuck his tongue out at her. "Dad. Macaulay's sticking his tongue out at me," Dondi thought as clearly as she could. Macaulay. Ronnie was caught off guard by the sudden ESP message. He had just finished a snack and was about to wash some dishes, as he attempted to adjust his sleeping hours around his children's school hours. "Leave your sister alone." No sooner than Ron had washed the half-dozen dishes that laid around, his wife had pulled into the driveway with their Hummer. Just the sight of her pulling into the driveway seemed to let him hear his pillow calling his name. With this thought, however, he had also instantly realized that he had heard the Hummer door slam shut while the motor was still running. Heading to the top of the staircase within the hallway, he looked down towards the front door just as his wife walked in the door. "Well honey," Belinda said as she saw her husband staring down towards her only wearing his boxers, "you didn't have to stay up. I'm just here to grab my purse." But momentarily Ron's mind was as blank as a sheet of paper. "I'll see you after I get out of work." Then, as she picked up her purse from just behind the door, where she had accidentally forgotten it, she stood back up and stared at her husband. Then, in slow motion, she set her purse back down and then walked up the short flight of steps. "Come on. Give me a kiss," she said, and then lightly wrapped one arm around his waist as she simultaneously slipped the finger of her other hand into the fly of his boxers. Instantly she found life as he immediately turned rock hard. "Actually hun, how about I go park the Hummer in the garage and then I'll call in sick? It's been a while, your dad will understand." "I'll help you park it," Ronnie said as a grin grew across his face. "Not while the sun is shining brightly," Belinda teased. Then, before turning to park their Hummer, she quickly lunged towards her husband, kissing him and then, at the same time, exposing his manhood, through the opening in the shorts, and gently stroking it before turning towards the door. "I'll meet you in the bedroom." "I'll beat you there," Ron said as he turned towards the room. Then, just as he walked into the room, he peeled off his boxers and tossed them beside the bed. As he waited on his wife, he spread himself out, in the center of the comforter, as his hardness still stood high, waiting on the attention that Belinda began to give it moments prior. It was a nasty smell that had prompted her to open her eyes. Then, just as she did open them, she quickly found herself to be within one of her dreadful nightmares. Odd. She thought to herself, what am I doing sitting down? Looking down, between her legs, she quickly realized that it was a cement step that was causing her rear to feel cold. It was the second step from the bottom. As she turned her head, to see where the steps led, she couldn't see good enough, through the thick fog, to see the top steps. Then, as she turned her head back towards the dirt that laid below her feet, she decided, for the sake of warming herself up, to stand and walk. Walking towards her right-hand direction, away from the stairs, she moved slowly so that perhaps she could hear Miguel off into the distance. As she strained to hear, however, the only sound that she could hear was the scuffle of her own feet below her. It was a short walk before she found herself having to turn right again. With the turn, Dondi quickly began to listen for any distant sounds that she made herself. As she continued to walk, she moved slowly as she simultaneously watched the ground that she was walking on. Then suddenly, she walked up upon another right-hand turn. As Dondi walked slowly, she had tried her best to take in every detail of her surroundings that she possibly could. In fact, she had guessed the length of wall that she had just turned off from, on the right side, was about 40 feet. There weren't options for turns, and so she had only followed the turn of the wall. Momentarily Dondi would, once again, stop her progressive move, so that she could listen for any sounds. It had to have been at least a half hour into her walk, since she left the steps. It seemed, for the first time, that Dondi had almost wished that Miguel would chase her. What the hell am I thinking? Looking up ahead of herself, as far as she could considering the lingering thick fog, it had seemed that there was no end to this stretch of wall. Yet, as she did her best to observe her surroundings, she kept a close eye on the floor, walls, and Dondi had never seen proof of a ceiling in any of her nightmares. Not that she could remember anyhow. With the details of any of her past dreams, not excluding this one, was the odor of mildew that lingered within the thick fog. Once in a while the aroma of blood had also filled the air as a slight gust of wind would suddenly stir the fog and dust around. The dirt, below her feet, as usual, was cold to the bare skin. As it was right now, the dirt was normally dry. In some areas, however, the dirt was damp and had stuck to her feet. The walls. Slowing down, as she suddenly drew herself to the detail of the fortress, of which she wandered around in, she noticed that the walls were also made of dirt. Not cement, just large portions of dirt that seemed to be packed to form the structure. Then, as she looked closer, she found moss growing in some areas of the wall. She had also felt that it was this moss that the strong odor of mildew came from. Sniffing, with her nose high into the air, then suddenly another gust of slow-blowing air, clearing the way for another breath. This was the first time, for Dondi, that one of her nightmares didn't include Miguel. Even now, as she found herself subduing to another corner, within the labyrinth, she had walked another 180 feet. As she now had to turn again, to the left this time, she found it to be much darker now as she used her hand, up against the wall, to guide herself. As Dondi proceeded, from the corner, she was now able to hear what sounded like someone screaming, in distance. More realistically, it sounded more like that it was coming from the other side of the wall. With this screaming sound, Dondi could also make out the sound of metal rattling against metal. Moving slowly, as she kept her hand on the wall, she continued to listen to any sounds that could be coming from nearby. The only thing that she sensed, however, was the odor of blood that was replacing the smell of mildew. This sensation was soon interrupted by the sudden feel of what felt like either water or something that was sticky, as well as she had also realized that she was walking in it. Instantly she felt the dirt, on the floor, begin to cake itself to her feet. Then, just seconds later, she was, once again, within another corner, causing her to turn towards her left again. Now, as she walked, she had felt that she was now walking away from the screaming and metal clashing sound. Once again, however, she had felt her hand drag through another wet sticky run on the wall. But now, as she left the corner behind her, she had felt, with her feet, that the dirt below her had began to feel dry. With this, The odor of blood began to become faint as she had also, once again, walked into a more lit-up area, leaving the darkness behind her. Looking up ahead of herself, through the thick fog, Dundee could see that about 30 feet ahead of her, to her left, that there was what looked like a partial wall sticking out of the main wall. Then, as she got closer, she could see that there was one in front of her as well. Then, as she was standing, with the first one that she had seen right beside her, she saw what almost resembled a doorway with the one that now stood directly in front of her. The way that the two sections of wall were, one would think that it's supposed to be a doorway. Only problem, however, is that the two walls were not exactly lined up with one another, they were zigzagged in a way that would require two doors to make a complete closing. As Dundee walked through and then to the other side of the two walls, she had suddenly noticed, way off into the distance, that a dog was barking. If it weren't for the fact that her own breathing was the only other sound that she could hear, she probably wouldn't have heard the dog. And then it was now that she remembered hearing about the dog during the séance of which her uncle Malachi had drawn a map. As Dundee continued to walk slowly, to not make any noise, she listened carefully, between her breaths and barks from the dog, for any reason that there might be for the dog to be barking. Before long, she could hear the sound of metal rubbing against metal. This sound would begin and stop between barks, causing her to think that maybe the dog was chained to a run line up off of the ground. Up ahead of her, she could see, through the fog, that the wall, to her right, either ends or turns. Now, the volume of the dog's barking was ear-piercing, as she had now noticed the dog's shadow as it ran back and forth, casting its shadow on the ground, just after the end of the humongous length of wall. As Dundee continued to listen, she still couldn't tell what it was that the dog was barking at. In the back of her mind, however, she feared that it might be her. Could it be possible that this dog is aware of my presence? Nearing the end of the wall, she then crept down to one knee as she kept her back tied up against the wall. Then, as she carefully turned her head, to peer around the corner, she had instantly found the dog staring back at her, face to face. Ruff. 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 Falling down, away from the dog, Dundee had rolled herself up into a ball, like a roly-poly, as sudden fear shot through her entire body. As she hit the ground, she had gotten dirt all in her hair, face, eyes, and mouth. Now, as she hid her face within her arms, she carefully opened her eyes as she looked back at the dog, as it was at the end of its chain staring back at her. As Dundee calmed herself down, she tried to see if there would be a way to get around Miguel's dog. If only I knew his name, she thought to herself. As she looked at the chain, she realized that she was right when she thought that the animal was chained to a run line. A run line that stretched from one side of the next wall, all the way to the other. Great. Dundee thought to herself, even if I did know the dog's name, he would be able to intercept me anyhow. Then, as she slowly stood up. Ruff. 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 Damn dog. She thought, shut the hell up. Ruff. Ruff. Grrr. With this, Dundee had instantly remembered that the dog, just like Macaulay's, has ESP as well. As she continued to stand, she stared at the dog as she slowly walked towards it. With her steps, the dog pulled against its chain, without barking, towards her. Then, just as they were able to almost touch one another, the dog began to sniff at Dundee's pant legs. Without her being quite close enough for the dog to actually touch her, she inched herself towards the dog as it had now seemed to be gentle. With this, the dog had also gone as far as to sit its rear quarters on the ground. Then, with just one more tiny move forward, the dog suddenly lunged forward and grabbed a hold of her pant leg. Grrr. The dog began to growl as it had also simultaneously began to pull her leg towards its dog house. Grrr. In an attempt to fight against the dog, by throwing herself onto the ground, into the direction of which she had came, she instantly dug her fingers into the dirt and kicked with her other leg. Help me! She screamed. Help! Grrr. The dog had now, as an attempt to fight against Dundee's efforts, began to jerk its head back and forth, throwing her small body, like a rag doll, all around. Hearing Dundee's cries through the wall, both Eddie and Angel jumped out of their bed, down the hall, and then into her room. What they had found was Dondi's body extended up off of the bed, legs straight out, with her fingers dug into the mattress. They could see that whatever it was that was attacking her had her by the pant leg. "It's Miguel's dog," Eddie said as he got near the head of the girl's bed, and began to help pull her arms away from the direction of which the dog was pulling. "Help me, Angel," he continued loudly. "Ronnie. Miguel's dog has your daughter." Ronnie was in deep sleep when he had suddenly received Eddie's message. Jumping up out of the bed, he had quickly ripped the door open and then flew, literally, down the hallway, down the stairs, and then down the basement's hallway to where Dondi's bedroom door was wide open. In less than 10 seconds, from the time that Eddie sent his message, Ronnie was standing over Angel and assisting in effort to save his daughter. "Come on, honey," Ronnie said loudly. "We're here for you." Then, just as Ron said this, Dondi's legs began to violently shake, back and forth, as some of the fabric had also torn. Then, suddenly, without warning, they had pulled Dondi off of the bed and then onto themselves as they all fell on top of each other. As the guys had quickly restrained their wits as they had also, with an exception of Ron, got to their feet, Ronnie remained on the floor as he held his daughter whom was still deep in her sleep and still within her nightmare. Somehow, seemingly out of nowhere, Dondi had gained the strength to break out of the grip of the vicious animal that had tried to pull her to her doom. Standing back up, to her feet, she knew now that there was absolutely no way for her to get past the dog. Using the dirty sleeve of her shirt, Dondi wiped her face dry as she quickly gained her poseur. Rough. 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 Looking back, towards the dog, Dondi knew well that she had assistance in breaking the grip from the dog. This meant that she was no longer alone. Suddenly, all the barking in the world didn't matter anymore. She knew that she was safe. Turning her back towards the dog, Dondi decided to walk, at least part of the way, back towards the direction that she had come. Still, however, not really putting much trust into her nightmare, she continued to walk, with caution, as far as she could. Or at least until she could no longer hear the dog. Then, just as she had, once again, found herself between the two partial walls, that were too weird to put a door into, and then sat down, on the back of her own ankles as she lowered herself down, close to the ground and covered her face with her hands. It had been nearly 30 minutes since Ronnie had been woken up to assist Dondi. With only about a half hour left till sundown, Ronnie, Eddie, and Angel had all decided to stay awake and head upstairs for breakfast. "Thanks for getting me up," Ron said as they reached the top of the steps. Then, no sooner than the words had came out of his mouth, Dondi began to wake up as she had also stretched her arms and legs, almost causing her father to drop her. "Hey sweetie. How are you feeling?" "Scared." Dondi replied. "Miguel's dog tried to eat you." Ronnie interrupted. No. But nobody can get you now, honey." As Ron spoke to her, Dondi wrapped both of her legs around his waist and then her arms around his neck. Then, as she laid her head on his shoulder, Belinda came out of the bedroom, with Ronnie's jeans in hand, and then also wrapped her arms around her husband, from behind and kissed Dondi on the forehead. "I love you, sweetie," she whispered into Ron's ear. Then, just seconds later, kissed Ronnie's earlobe. "I'm gonna make some coffee." "Sounds good to me," Ron answered and then turned to head out of the room. "Dondi. I'm gonna set you down on the couch for now. I'll wake you up for breakfast. Okay?" he whispered. "Okay, Daddy. I love you." "I love you too, baby," her father said and then got up to walk out of the living room. Just before leaving her side, however, he pulled the Afghan off of the back of the couch and laid it over her. "Well gee," Belinda announced as he entered the kitchen. "You moved real quick this morning." Just as she finished speaking, she finished pouring water into the coffee maker and then turned towards her husband with his jeans in her hand. "Would you like some help putting these on?" "Ah." A voice said from behind. "Sure he does." "I'll help him," Malachi said as he walked into the kitchen. Then, after Belinda began to hug him, from the front, Malachi wrapped his arms, from behind, around both Ronnie and Belinda. "Rough start this morning, little bro." "Yeah." Miguel's dog attacked Dondi. Turning his head, to face his brother, whom had just put his chin into his shoulder, he lightly rested his own forehead up against Malachi's forehead. "This shit is getting real old. I wish that we could." "Ronnie," Malachi interrupted. "We're trying to do everything that we can. Don't give up, buddy." With this said, Malachi lightly let go of his hug as he also, simultaneously, put his finger into Ron's armpit as an attempt to get a smile out of him. It worked. "That was so cool," Scott said after watching Dondee's rescue. "I didn't think that it was possible to manipulate someone's nightmares." "These aren't just nightmares, Scott," James explained as they now stood around the upstairs living room. It's a evil spell put onto this family by Miguel when he died. Besides that," Sterling added, "they're not really manipulating their dreams. They are manipulating the person's body while they're having the dream." "Well, still," Scott continued, "that's cool." Then, abruptly, Sterling turned around and began to head out to the kitchen. "Where are you going?" Scott asked. "I'm gonna get an early start with Macaulay this morning," Sterling answered as he turned to face Scott. Today is American history." Then, with a smile on his face, Sterling turned back around and then headed out of the kitchen, towards the hallway. Walking into the boys' bedroom, Sterling immediately found that Lucifer, Tommy, and Macaulay were all asleep. Then, as he headed up the ladder, to Macaulay's bunk, he quickly found him sleeping on his back, uncovered, and only wearing his underwear. Sitting on the edge of the mattress, beside Macaulay's pillow, he leaned over his head as he faced the wall, and blew into the 11-year-old's face. Opening up his eyes, after air had blown into his nose, mouth, and ruffled his eyelashes, he looked up to find Sterling staring at him. "What's going on, Sterling?" Macaulay asked. "Not much. But we are gonna learn some American history through." With this said, he then poked Macaulay in the ribs, gently, with his fingertips causing him to lightly jump. "Well," Macaulay said as he stretched his arms and legs, "American history. That covers a large range of subjects." He continued as he then yawned. "You wouldn't mind narrowing it down a bit, would you?" "Okay. Today is the anniversary of the death of an important character in our history. Who do you think that it is?" The question was completely off the wall to Macaulay. He had just woken up, still only wearing his underwear. Nobody asked him how he was feeling, much less did anyone say good evening, a quiz first thing without even having food on the belly to start off with. "Sterling, I really don't know." "Who?" "Billy the Kid. Or, also known as William H. Bonney. He died 153 years ago today. July 14th, of 1881. Now, as Macaulay sat up beside Sterling, he seemed to have a little interest now, with a name that he had heard about. Who exactly was he, Sterling? And why did he die? Rather than getting dressed first, Macaulay's curiosity wanted fulfillment first as he continued to sit beside his teacher. "Well," Sterling said, "I'll start from the beginning. William H. Bonney was born to Catherine Antrim in 1859. From a young age William worked as a cattle herder. Eventually he worked for a man named John Tunstall, a farm owner, until John's murder in 1878. Immediately after the murder of John Tunstall, a group of 4 men, including William, were deputized by the local sheriff, John Chisholm. This group of men were called the Regulators. During the time of which William was deputized, he killed at least one person, of which had, in turn, turned William into a fugitive. As a fugitive, and now nicknamed Billy the Kid, John Chisholm deputized Pat F. Garrett to hunt down and bring William to justice. "So," Macaulay interrupted, "when he became Billy the Kid, he was then a bad guy?" "Yep. And then, 2 weeks later Pat returned with William. William was then sentenced to death by hanging." "On July 14th of 1881? Macaulay interrupted again. "No. Later, while chained on the second floor level of the jail, William's jailers, Bob and J.W., allowed William to use the bathroom at an outhouse just outside of the jail. Moments later, as J.W. was escorting William back to the jail, William had used a handgun, that was hidden in the outhouse, to kill J.W. Moments later William then killed Bob with a shotgun from within the jail. A few years later, on July 14 of 1881, as William was entering his girlfriend's, Paleata's, home, Garrett ambushed and killed William. 6 months later Paleata gave birth to a boy named Telesphore, whom is believed to be son to William H. Bonney. After his death, he was buried in Hyco, Texas. On the top of his headstone the word Pals marked his memory by his many friends. Pat Garrett ambushed Billy the Kid? Macaulay asked. Yep. You see, Pat had gone into Paleata's home and then tied her up, to her bed, and gagged her so that she couldn't scream. Then, after he hid himself, behind her bed, he waited for William to come in and then shot him. But isn't that cheating? Macaulay asked as he became very concerned. Yeah. But in those days there wasn't any such thing as cheating. You just did what you had to get the job done. I think that the police should have to follow the laws too. Aunt Nicole, and Grandma Karina, when she was a police officer, followed the laws. Well, we have good police officers and we have bad police officers no matter where we are. It's always been like that, Macaulay. Your Aunt Nicole is a great police officer and your grandmother was a great police officer as well. I hope that I grow up to be someone that everyone will remember forever. That would be cool, Macaulay said and then turned and looked Sterling in the face. I think, Sterling replied, that you just may be one of those people that everyone will remember. Come on now, get Lucifer and Tom up for breakfast. It's almost time to eat. Hey honey. Karina hollered loudly as she rolled down the car window. Considering the time of year, September 9th, it had been unusually warm as David and Karina prepared to attend a surprise party for Nicole. Would you please grab an extra roll of film? Yep. I'll be right back, hun. David replied. There was a lot of work put into making sure that everyone would show up on time. For the most part Malachi had done all of the food preparation, David and Karina made the phone calls, Ronnie and Eddie cleaned the house, of which is where the surprise party, for Nicole's retirement, would take place. And then, of course, it was the duty of everyone to keep a lid on the surprise. As David returned to the car, approximately 10 minutes after he had gone into Safeway, they immediately raced onto the exit of the parking lot just as Officer Kimney passed them. With his passing, he flashed the overhead lights of the patrol car. This was a pre-planned event to indicate that Nicole was now at the police department filling out her retirement paperwork and benefit package. Following close behind Kimney, Dave and Karina soon reached the top of Finley Lane and then pulled up, past the house, as they parked on 9th Street. As they parked, their car was just behind Karina's mom's car. They quickly walked back towards the house. Then, just as they walked up to the front door of the house, Kimney pulled the patrol car into the drive. Hey Kim. Dave called out just as Officer Ney opened up his door, how about you go ahead and park the car in the garage? That way Nicole won't know that you're here either. Sounds like a plan to me, Kim said and then called the police department, by cell phone, to alert them of his location. He was afraid, that if he would have said his location by radio, that the surprise might be spoiled. As David and Karina walked into their children's home, they were both immediately met by Malachi. Hi Mom and Dad. Their oldest announced. Hello honey. Karina replied. Is everyone ready? Yeah. Grandma's serving some coffee, to the guests, while we wait, Malachi continued. Now that you guys are here. Chief Ney is parking the patrol car in the garage. David interrupted his son, he should be up here any second. Well. That's everyone then. Malachi answered and then turned, to go back into the kitchen, as his parents followed close behind. Seconds later the garage door could be heard closing as Officer Ney made his way into the house. It was only about another 20 minutes or so that Nicole was walking in through the front door. Reading over her retirement package, as she continued her way up the stairs, Nicole was completely oblivious to the fact that about 30 people, composed out of family, friends, and co-workers, were only about 15 feet away from her. Then, as she quickly poured herself some coffee, then began to sip out of her cup, as she simultaneously turned towards the living room, with her paperwork in front of her eyes, she suddenly noticed a whole room of people staring back at her. Surprise! Everyone screamed all at once. The sudden announcement startled Nicole enough that she had poured nearly half of her coffee on the floor. With her many friends, family, and co-workers was Chief Ney. So that's why he didn't stick around at the police department while I was filling out my paperwork. Nicole thought to herself as she fought off the urge to cry. Now you and Malachi can just enjoy the rest of your lives, Marie said as she stepped forward, out of the crowd, and into the kitchen. Walking close behind his grandmother, Malachi followed the elderly women towards Nicole's side where they both embraced her. "I love you, honey," Malachi whispered into Nicole's ear just as a flash, from a camera, blinded all three of them. Simultaneously, though a little too late, Malachi, Nicole, and Marie all smiled at the direction that the camera's flash came from. With the smiles, about another half-dozen flashes lit up the kitchen. "I love you too, Malachi." As Nicole answered her husband, she had also partially turned to where she could set down her coffee cup. "When did you put all of this together?" With the question she then wrapped both arms around Malachi and quietly cried. As she rested her chin on Malachi's shoulder, she looked at the crowd as she had also seen David, Karina, Mrs. Bruce, Mrs. Alberts, from across the street, a few other police officers and dispatchers, and a few other people that were friends to Malachi and Ronnie that she had only known by first name. "We've been working on this for the last 6 months, hun," Malachi said, "but now, I've thought of the perfect gift." As these words came out of Malachi's mouth, he had realized, for the first time in his life, how nice it would be living in a not-so-crowded home. Then, as he turned his head, to face his wife, he looked towards his parents, as they smiled back at him, and thought about how nice one of those apartments would be. Soon all guys were out in the backyard of the house, as they prepared the barbecue pit, while the women stayed inside preparing chilled food items such as potato salad, deviled eggs, lemon cream pie, and then at least another dozen food items, while the kids, Macaulay, Don D, and then some of the children to the guests ran in and out of the house. "So Malachi," David said as he found himself alone with his son for a moment, "what gift did you just think of for Nicole?" "An apartment of our own out at Ridgeview. Close to you guys," Malachi said as he momentarily paused his rolling of sausage on the grill. As he continued to look back at his father, he saw a smile slowly form in his face. "I think that would be a great idea," the 59-year-old man said, "but I think that you should wait just a little longer though." "What do you mean, Dad?" Malachi asked as he turned his head again, towards the grill. "Well, Malachi, your children, Lucifer and Tommy, are only 16 years old. I don't think that it would be exactly fair to drop that extra responsibility onto your little brother. Remember that his kids are only 12 years old." "Yeah," Malachi replied as he turned to face his father again, "I guess that we should wait a little longer." "Just a little longer, Malachi. Maybe 2 or 3 years. However, I do think that perhaps a night or two alone with your wife at the Holiday Inn would be a perfect idea." Just as the words came out of David's mouth, he could see an instant glow in his son's face. Then, taking another step closer to his 37-year-old son, Dave wrapped both arms around him. "I love you, son." "I love you too, Dad," Malachi said as he wrapped one arm around the older man. As he held on to his dad, Malachi realized that his father's 6th birthday was only 11 days away. As he thought back in time, he could hardly believe that so much time had gone by. It was now that he was reminded that both Lucifer and Tommy would be getting their driver's license soon. It was also now that Malachi had taken notice to the difference in appearance between his parents, of their age. His mom didn't look a day over 30, his grandmother Marie, whom was now almost 118 years old, didn't look any older than perhaps 60. His wife and, of course, himself both looked as if they were only in their early 20s. Angel. Ever since Angel should have gone through puberty, Malachi was stumped on the issue of his 26-year-old cousin. Turning his head away from his father as he saw Angel standing on the porch, Angel was standing beside Macaulay and Dondi, of which both were much larger than himself. Still to this day someone would call you crazy if you had claimed that Angel was a day over 10 years of age. Then, as Angel began to point up into the air, showing something to Macaulay, the fact that Angel had no hair in his armpits showed clearly. "Malachi!" David suddenly yelled. "Have you heard a word that I've just said?" The elderly man asked as his smile slowly grew back into place. Yeah. I think that a room at the Holiday Inn would be perfect, Dad, Malachi said as he then refocused his eyes on the grill. He quickly realized that the portion of sausage, that he had been rolling around, back and forth across the charcoal grill, was now burned beyond being edible. Well, David continued, that's the main thing for right now anyhow. Are you feeling alright, Malachi? Yeah, Dad. I'm fine, just a lot of things on my mind. That's all. With this said, Malachi threw the sausage at one of the 8 dogs that they owned that were chasing one another around in circles. It was about 3 hours later when the surprise party had finally come to an end. Then, as the last few guests were headed out the door, he was standing beside his wife, at the door, as he then looked at her. I've got plans for us to be alone for the night, honey. Well. That's cool. Nicole said as she stood back from her husband, where at? What would you think about 2 nights at the Holiday Inn? Just you and I. No kids, no dogs, just us? With each item that Malachi listed, he saw the smile, on Nicole's face, grow bigger. Then, as they both turned, to head back up the stairs, he pressed her lips, mid-step, into the side of her husband's neck. Yes. That would be great, she said loudly. Her sudden excitement quickly gained the attention of both Ronnie and Eddie as they washed dishes. Then, just as they walked into the kitchen, Angel, Lucifer, and Tommy all walked into the kitchen as well. What would be great? Angel asked as his curiosity was instantly pushed to its limits. Nicole and I. Malachi spoke up. Are gonna spend 2 nights out away from home. We're gonna go to the Holiday Inn. That sounds like a good plan, Ronnie said as he wiped his hands dry onto his pant legs. Then, as he lifted his upper body back up again, he reached out, towards his brother, and patted him on the shoulder. You guys go and enjoy. The kids will be just fine. Thank you, Ron. Nicole said as she then looked towards Lucifer and Tommy. I want you two to be good for your Uncle Ronnie, Uncle Eddie, and Belinda, and Angel. All right? Yes, Mom. We will. Lucifer replied. How long are you guys gonna be gone? For Lucifer, obviously by the fact that he was making his parents repeat themselves, he was shocked by this first time that he would be without both of his parents for an extended period of time. Just the implication of their plans was a shock to him. Just 2 days, Lucifer, Malachi said again. Everything will be alright, buddy. Stepping forward as he put an arm over both Lucifer's and Tom's shoulders. Guys. It's only a couple of days. As he continued to attempt to ensure the boys, it had seemed that not only had the boys' jaws fallen to the floor but also, perhaps, they had swallowed their tongues as well as neither of them spoke. In fact, they seemed to have frozen as neither of them moved. Snap out of it, guys, Ron said as he also snapped his fingers in front of the kid's face as well. Everything will be just fine. We'll do something like go shopping, for school clothes, play games. Go ride the semis. Angel interrupted. Ride the what? Malachi asked as his little cousin interrupted them. Nothing. Just a joke. Angel quickly answered as he attempted to hide his face. Later, that same evening, Malachi and Nicole found themselves waiting for service at the desk of the Holiday Inn. As they patiently waited, they had seen other customers coming and going to the restaurant within the motel. Along with them, both Nicole and Malachi had also seen a heavy-set woman named Sandy Herndon. By uniform they knew that this woman worked for the hotel, however, by the fact that she was carrying linen, they figured that she worked for housekeeping. May I help you folks? The heavy-set woman asked. Turning to face the women, Malachi pulled out his wallet. Yeah. We would like a room, for 2 nights, and also dinner. As Malachi spoke, they watched the joy-filled women set the folded linen on the desk, and then walk around the counter to service them. Alrighty, hun. Now for 2 nights that'll be $83.75. This includes a $1 deposit for your room keys. As the women continued to speak, she had also handed Malachi and Nicole each a key and then pointed to different items, on the receipt, that was included with the cost of their room. The swimming pool is open 24 hours a day, for guests only. Also, you've got free DVD rentals, here down the hallway. Pointing towards Nicole's left. And this also includes 3 meals per day at our restaurant. Pausing suddenly, the women then looked up towards the main entrance where a heavy-set man had walked in. "Hey Harry." She spoke loudly, "I'm over here." "I'm sorry guys. That's my husband," she said now suddenly quietly. "That's alright," Malachi responded. Then, just moments later, both Malachi and Nicole were headed up a flight of steps to room number 205. After just setting their costs in on a bed, they quickly walked back downstairs and then into the restaurant where they were immediately seated. Then, within just a very short period of time, both Malachi and Nicole were eating, having dessert, and then headed to a nearby gift shop where they purchased swimming suits. "Do you remember when we went to Texas years ago?" Nicole asked her husband. "Yeah. That was a lot of fun." Pausing, as Malachi recalled some of the details of their vacation. He then sat down, on the bed beside Nicole, as he slowly pulled off his jeans. "I remember how much fun we had swimming in the Gulf of Mexico just off of Galveston. How fast we flew to get there." As Malachi continued to speak, he soon kicked off his underwear and then began to pull up his shorts. Before Malachi had the shorts pulled up all the way, just above his knees, Nicole suddenly reached over, with her hand, as she grasped onto the shaft of Malachi's penis. Then, as she continued to hold on to him, she leaned her head towards him and kissed him on the mouth. "I love you honey," Nicole said. "Maybe in a couple years, we'll be able to get more time to ourselves." "How about in about 2 to 3 years?" Malachi said as he made eye contact with his wife. "That way Tom and Lucifer will be able to be responsible enough for themselves. We'll move out to Ridgeview next to our parents." "That sounds like a perfect plan," Nicole said as she released her grip and then allowed Malachi to continue pulling up his shorts. Then, as Nicole put on her suit, she continued, "Also, I think that another vacation would be a good idea." Short afterwards, after they grabbed towels out of their room's restroom, they headed down to the pool. For the most part, for both Tommy and Lucifer, nothing had really changed. Ronnie and Belinda had expected about the same out of the two boys as Malachi and Nicole did. However, overall everything was just the same. "Now tell me about this riding on the semis," Ronnie said as they all sat down at the table. With veal and spaghetti for dinner, on the day after Malachi and Nicole had gone away, Ron had only guessed, to himself, what it was that Angel could have been possibly talking about. By the end of the meal, Ronnie had heard much more than what he wanted to hear about this dangerous game. Ronnie wasn't really angry, however, he was very concerned about the safety of not only Lucifer and Tommy, but also Angel's. "I just want you guys to be very careful." Ron spoke up, "We love you guys very much and it would hurt us badly if something were to ever happen to either one of you. I'm not giving you my approval to play like this, but I'm not going to tell you guys no either."